The Morrison government is celebrating today after updated figures showed the budget effectively back in balance for the first time in 11 years. But the latest unemployment figures are not as positive, climbing to 5.3% in August, the highest level in a year. I spoke to the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, a short time ago. Josh Frydenberg, what contribution has the government actually made to this budget outcome?
Well, we've put in place the right policies to help create jobs, and one of the real stories out of this final budget outcome, which is a $13.8 billion improvement on what was initially forecast when the budget was handed down in May 2018, and is the first balanced budget in 11 years. One of the real stories out of today is the fact that there have been 300,000 new jobs created, 100,000 more than Treasury forecasts. That's led to an improvement in the receipts and lower payments as more people move from welfare to work.
It's true that employment growth has been very strong this year, but the budget figures really reflect low wages, low inflation and very strong commodity prices, don't they? And the government doesn't control those things.
Well, when it comes to real wages growth, it's 0.7%, which is higher than the historical average, and it's also higher than when we came to government. But of course, we want it to be higher still, and a tight labour market contributes to that. Productivity gains contributes to that. When it comes to commodity prices, we had a flat assumption of $55 a tonne for iron ore in the budget. It averaged at $72 a tonne. That's well below the $180 a tonne iron ore that the Labor Party enjoyed when they were last in government, and it has, of course, contributed to an improved terms of trade, but that is just one factor.
But if we go back to the question of what the government's done, the figures also show that spending, the real growth in spending in that year blew out to 3.9% real growth. That's a huge figure.
Well, if you look at our spending growth, Laura, it's actually around half of what we inherited. So we have brought it back in control, and we have lower spending going forward. So we've had very targeted spending, we've had lower spending, we've had more people in work, which means less people on welfare, and that's also led to a reduction in payments.
You've benefited from an underspend in the NDIS, and I'm not suggesting that you were cutting spending, but if NDIS spending picks up and commodity prices start to ease off, how resilient is the improvement in the budget?
Well, we'll deliver a surplus as promised, and we're the first in 12 years in 2019, 2020. The Australian economy is resilient because while Germany, the United Kingdom, Singapore, Sweden and other economies experienced negative economic growth in the June quarter, the Australian economy continued to grow. The 50 basis point rate cut has helped stabilise the housing market, which is important. The free trade agreements we've entered into have opened opportunities for Australian businesses to some 2 billion new customers, and the tax cuts that have passed the Parliament have already seen more than $16 billion go out to Australian taxpayers in refunds.
There's been a lot of discussion about the relative roles of the Reserve Bank and the government. You flagged a possible rearrangement of the agreement with the Reserve Bank. Where are those discussions up to?
They're ongoing between Treasury and the Reserve Bank. We're committed to a 2 to 3% inflation target, but what we've seen, Laura, over the last 20 quarters, that for 17 of those, the inflation number has been below that target range. So today it's 1.6%, well below the 2 to 3% range. Now, this is not unusual for the world. We're seeing low inflation, low interest rates and relatively low unemployment around the world. The things that we're just working through is how do we ensure that that target is met, because inflationary expectations are important to things like wages and wages growth.
The Federal Court has ruled today that the Biloela asylum seeker family should stay in Australia while their case is assessed. Something that might have helped you even further get back into the black was not spending $1.4 billion on reopening Christmas Island. Was that money well spent, and what's the point of having them stay there?
Well, obviously, Peter Dutton, who's handling this matter, has said publicly that they will remain in Christmas Island on the advice of Border Protection. This is obviously a very challenging case, like many are in this space. But let's not forget there were 1,500 people of Sri Lankan origin who were deemed not to be refugees, who've been sent back by both Labor and coalition governments. And there's another 5,700 people of Sri Lankan origin who have also had their refugee status rejected or cases rejected and are again waiting to go back. So the border protection policies that we have in place are tough, but they've also led to no deaths at sea, as we've seen previously. They've led to the closure of detention centres and a much more orderly border protection policy and policy that has restored the public's trust and confidence.
Treasurer, thanks for your time tonight.
Good to be with you.